Hey everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing Sound of Freedom. This was directed by Alejandro Monteverde. Every once in a while, a movie seems to come out of nowhere that gains just a lot of traction in the mainstream in a way that people just weren't expecting. And I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding this film, perhaps politically or whatever. That tends to always be the case these days with pretty much every new release. But just overall, in my experience, I tend to respond to the material more as entertainment or as a piece of art, just because A, it is a movie, that is its purpose, and then B, because that's what this channel is. It's a movie channel. And I do find it really sad that these days in particular movies are just so weaponized politically and so pointedly, and we forget the importance of the subject matter at hand, or we forget the point of just sitting there and responding to a piece of art. Now, a movie like Sound of Freedom is way less likely to be made compared to something like Barbie, which again is also very sad, but propaganda, as I said, is propaganda. Propaganda also exists in art, and so I just kind of judge it at how I see it. I judge it kind of on its merit. And outside noise can be very interesting when it comes to talking about a new project, but when you remove the context of all that noise surrounding it, I kind of think that Sound of Freedom is not particularly interesting to talk about. And again, watching it just as an experience, I didn't gain very much from it as a viewer, and that makes me sad, because it's not an offensive movie by any stretch, nor is it terrible by any stretch. It's just, this is a subject matter that, it would mean a lot to me if a great filmmaker and a great team could come together and do it justice and really understand the tone that they need to convey. A truly great filmmaker, give it the proper gravitas that it deserves. And I think there are going to be those who might take issue with the way that the tone of the movie. And I just mean, when you think about a subject like this, your natural inclination is to think, oh, this is going to be like a documentary or like a docudrama. It's going to have like gritty realism and that type of thing. But no, this movie it's trying to be a piece of entertainment that is engaging on that basic level. It is trying to be properly cinematic. But to me, if you're really offended by that aspect of it, that just makes me want to roll my eyes, just because it reminds me a lot of like the Jeffrey Dahmer show that came out last year, the Netflix show that, it was very controversial and people were like, how dare you exploit these people's situations and all that stuff. And it's like, it's entertainment. Film, no matter which way you look at it, is going to be manipulation, and art is absolutely not reality. It is a distortion of reality. So creative liberties are always going to be taken. To me, it is more about how you employ said creative liberties to try and tell the proper story that needs to be told. And that's really my only problem with it. I have no problem with it being cinematic or trying to be an engaging piece of entertainment in that way. It's more just, I find the filmmaking to be not very sophisticated, not sophisticated enough to be able to carry the weight of such a subject matter in a convincing fashion. It's definitely using a lot of familiar story elements from classic movies. It is a kind of Heart of Darkness, Apocalypse Now type of framework that we're using, and we are telling the story of Tim Ballard's attempts to save a child from sex traffickers. And yeah, the movie does have a very noir kind of thriller type of quality to give the audience that hook. But unfortunately, I just think that the movie is really poorly constructed as a narrative, and I think it's in desperate need of an editor. I think there are two things you could have done. You could have either shaved a good 20 minutes off of this movie and tightened it to a more compelling thriller, or I think you could fill those 20 minutes with something more interesting. Fill it with actual pathos, actual character depth and complexity, so that we have something to chew on here other than just the bone. I really don't need a Heart of Darkness for basic bitches. I feel like there are plenty of those copycats already, and if you're going to go that route though, you've really got to commit to the tone and a lot of the themes that are there. And unfortunately, I don't think that this movie understands those themes, and nor is it able to take those creative risks. It feels really like a slog to get through. It does, I would say it picks up in the second half of the movie, but it's just, as an experience, the pacing and everything is just incredibly uneven. One of the big issues for me is that the main character is really uninteresting, in my opinion. It's like he has a family, but we don't get a sense of that family life. He has a wife, but she's just kind of there, kind of just creepily in the background, like she's like an army wife. There's no bite to him or her. We don't get a sense of what he is losing by going on this major journey. I don't get a sense of any danger that he feels, kind of skirting the lines between the darkness and the light here. You have to be willing to test those boundaries and crawl on the edge of the razor blade, so to speak. And you have to have that moral conflict, I think, shot back at you in an interesting way. Having to face the ugliest things that make you squirm, that make you hurt, in order to be able to do something about it. And it's a really powerful thing, and it could be so powerful if it were directed well. Certainly the character has to make big choices, cross barriers, make friends in places he normally wouldn't in order to get closer to the people that he normally would never be close to. And, I start to feel more that danger and that risk, but it's more kind of in the second half of the movie. There is one shot towards the beginning of the movie when we're kind of getting a sense of the protagonist, and it's where he takes a pedophile to a restaurant and they're talking, and then the pedophile is arrested. And in the next shot, after he's been arrested, our main character is still sitting at the restaurant table, but he is sitting in the spot where the pedophile was once sitting. Now, whether that was an intentional creative thing or not, I thought, oh, isn't that interesting? It never really is materializing into anything, but I think I wanted more of that, because that really does feel like something that would be in like a Heart of Darkness type of story. He's more a vessel for the audience. It's our experience, and we're experiencing it through his eyes, through the first person. I don't mind him being a little bit more of a blank slate, but it's like we really do need to feel that conflict again. We need to understand his internal experience, his everything, and we don't. And every scene here is just very basic so far as the writing, and very boring. And the lead actor, his face has just this worn sadness to him, but it verges on too sentimental, and I find it a little bit too excessive to be the audience surrogate. It feels like every scene has basically one thing on its mind: the process and the transition section of the scene, and then the payoff. Now, obviously, that is important in every single scene as a screenwriter, but there's got to be a lot more to it. There's got to be layers to it so that, it's not so cut and dry. There's just no invisibility so far as the functionality of these scenes is concerned. I didn't love the performances in the movie overall, but there were a couple performances that did stand out to me. Several, actually. The young girl who is held captive, I thought she was very strong. She had a really powerful and a haunting face that does kind of ring throughout the movie. You always feel that presence, so I think that's great. I've always really liked Bill Camp as, a character actor, and I could get behind him because we do at least get a sense of who he is and why he's the way that he is. And, even though it is very on the surface, again, I really like the actor. I think he does a pretty solid job here. And, he is an ally to the protagonist here. And there is a very evil character in the movie, a villain of sorts, that is in the third act of the movie. And I thought that he played it fantastic. I thought it was the best performance in the movie. Because you could tell he thought about the character somewhat. He didn't play him as some like cartoonish, sniveling type of bad guy, which he really could in a movie like this, I feel like. But he plays him as a human being, which is bone chilling and very painful in a lot of ways. So I found that performance to be very, very engaging. And the direction in those sections overall, they're not great, but I will say they do the job. They're competent so far as creating the proper tension, I think. But yeah, unfortunately, that's really all I have to say about the movie so far as the things that I like about it. I think, the intensity of a subject like this deserves the utmost respect from the artist. And when you can do that, you can really touch a nerve with people. And not to say that this movie isn't touching a nerve. Obviously it is. Lots of people are seeing it, and it's creating certainly a moment. But I tend to feel like that has to do more with, again, the noise surrounding it and the politics, and less about the actual quality of the material. And I would much rather the material be powerful and touch a nerve in people as an artistic experience, because that's the sort of thing that lasts in people's minds. That's the type of thing that gets remembered for years and years. It's not just the immediate noise and the marketing. But not to say that it shouldn't be marketed, and you can go as creative as you want with the marketing. I think the more creative you can be, the more interesting it becomes. And obviously, they're doing it. All of this has been more kind of indirect and underground, and that's awesome that they were able to gain the eyes that they did. As I said, the movie it's using a lot of traditional tropes and trying to be cinematic and all of that, but with nothing interesting to set it apart from a lot of the traditional stories that it's pulling from. And again, all of the motivations, the ideas are fed to us all on the surface. And the music is absolutely exhausting. It's really, really devastating, but to the point where it just feels very one note. It's like, okay, we get it. Can we have a break from the monotony of all of this? And we need, I think, a break from the monotony of the narrative as a whole. The first half of the movie, as I said, it really is slow and it lacks focus, it lacks movement, and I feel like it really, really could benefit from some editing and just give us more of a strong core to execute from the onset. But really, I mean, the movie doesn't bug me, it doesn't bother me, it doesn't make me angry or anything like that. It's just, you know, it makes me sad that the execution of it feels kind of mediocre. I will say that one thing that is good about it is that you can tell the people behind it really believe in what they're talking about. You can tell that it is made with intent and heart. I just don't think that heart is enough when it comes to bringing a story to life creatively. But again, I don't see any reason to be offended by this film here. It's just a bit of a bore. It's a struggle just as an artistic piece of expression, as a piece of artistic propaganda or whatever. And I think it's interesting how I've reviewed back to back, you know, this movie and Barbie, two of the most, I think, popular and most controversial movies of 2023 so far as I can see at this moment. But when you look at them, they couldn't be more opposite. They are very much serving their particular side of the political aisle. Barbie is very much a liberal feminist film over here, and I look at it and the hypothesis of it I ultimately reject, and I find the whole movie to be kind of ridiculous and shallow and contradictory. Very, very messy, and yet the talent and you know, everybody that was working on that particular movie is just so top notch. And those elements I couldn't help but get swept up by. I couldn't help but smile a lot during the movie, so I was quite torn. But then we contrast that with a movie like Sound of Freedom, which, you know, they could only dream of having the resources at their disposal that somebody like Greta Gerwig is able to have, and to be able to have that kind of promotion for sure. But it doesn't. Now, again, when it comes to both types of propaganda, personal taste, I'm much more interested in Sound of Freedom. I'm much more interested in that because that's a far more pressing issue in my opinion. This is the one that deserves the studio backing. When you look at the narrative and the message of it, it's so much more focused and so much more clear than Barbie is. And I found all of that to be, you know, refreshing on a basic level. And yet again, the experience of getting through this movie and just looking at this movie as a whole, it's very dull. It has nothing to do with politics or the noise surrounding it for me. I'm just kind of going off my my gut reaction to it, what I really feel in my heart about it, and I just don't find it to be a compelling piece of entertainment. I'm happy for the success of the movie. You know, when a movie comes out of nowhere and it ruffles feathers in this way, I don't know, I see that as a good thing. More of that needs to be done. It's very satisfying because it sends a clear message to Hollywood of what the people want to see and what the future of entertainment should be. But, you know, Hollywood continues to turn their nose up at audiences, but are they going to ignore this? Will be the really interesting discussion to have. So all I can hope is that Hollywood is listening here. I know this is much to their chagrin, the success of this movie, but based on how lucrative this piece is, it's going to be very hard to ignore it. And I think they're really going to have to start making changes, thinking differently. Now, if the controversy surrounding this movie piques your interest and you want to see what all the fuss is about and why people are going so crazy, well then hell, go ahead, decide for yourself. I don't care. There's just not really a compelling reason to see it beyond that thing, and I just find that cheap. But what an interesting thing we are seeing right now, and we are seeing, I think, a potential title shift, not only there, but obviously with the writer strike and everything, and I'm just really intrigued by it all. But that is my video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist, I do commission portraits, and I sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who are great. Guys, thank you so much for your continued support, and welcome to all the new members. If you're interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.